everyone, welcome to Tales in Text. I'm your host Nisha. I hope you're doing fabulous. Now, many of you may not know that for a very long time, almost for 6 to 8 months, I really struggled to connect with my cartomancy practice, almost stopping it entirely. And I'm sure that this is not something new to a lot of you, especially if you're someone who reads tarot and oracle cards or any sort of cartomancy practice, right? There are times when we feel just really washed up. We really don't have that enthusiasm or that energy. We feel like we've hit a wall. We don't know what's happened, but the connection between us and our cards and our practice has just snapped, and nothing we do sort of seems to reignite that passion that we have for our practice. So if you have experienced this yourself, then don't worry, I have experienced the same thing. I've gone through the whole ordeal and I've come out of it successfully. So in today's video, I'm just going to be providing very quick tips on how you can reconnect with your cartomancy practice, how you can reconnect with your spiritual practice, especially when it comes to developing a daily practice. Now, right off the bat, I do want to let you know that my tip number one is that you don't have to make cartomancy or card pulling a daily practice. If you find that you don't have the time or the personal bandwidth, that's the energy or resources, or just not any interest to pull a card every day, then that's perfectly all right. Try to figure out a schedule that works for you and use that as your groundwork or your framework to build a cartomancy practice that is bespoke for you. Now, the reason I have started a daily practice myself is because during those 6 to 8 months when I just couldn't connect with my cards, I would pull a card maybe once a week. That was it. And I found that I was lacking the emotional satisfaction of having a sustainable or rather an authentic spiritual practice. And now that was just for myself. And so I thought that I would change up the way I view cartomancy, the way I viewed and worked with tarot and oracle cards, and at least start doing 2 times a week. That is 2 times card pulling in a week. Then I made it 3, then I made it 4, and finally now I've come to a spot where I have built a sustainable and authentic practice where I do pull a card a day, every day. And of course there are occasional days when I feel really bored and I don't pull any card, but you know that's the name of the game, right? That's how things go. So with that being said, that you don't need a daily practice, let's get down to my top tips on how you can build a sustainable tarot and oracle or any cartomancy practice. And as usual, I've made notes. Now, first off, my very first tip: read as you are where you are. And what I mean by this is, don't focus too much on creating the sacred space. Now, I totally understand why creating a sacred space helps, because when you're in a cluttered environment, your mind is not going to be super focused on what you're doing right now. It's going to be distracted. You're going to be thinking of all the mess that's around. You may want to clean up, and otherwise you may suddenly remember something because the objects that are left around might trigger some memory or some recollection in you. I totally get why creating a sacred space helps in bringing us into that zone and that focus where we're able to really pull those cards and really commit to the practice and get the most out of our reading. I totally get that. But at no point should creating the sacred space become a chore. It shouldn't become the main or the highlight of the experience of cartomancy. Your highlight should be actually pulling the card, reading it, and getting that insight that you need for that day. And again, like I said, there's no judgment in creating sacred space, but it should not become a chore that distracts you from the actual purpose, which is practicing cartomancy, pulling a card. For example, if I have this deck right here, which is the Reclaim, and I want to just pull up a card and just pull it out. Okay, the card is Expression, and I'm just gonna read the images, find out what this resonates within me, and I'm just gonna start reading. I don't believe in creating a sacred space all the time because I've personally found it distracting, and maybe you do too. So move on to tip 2, which is don't focus too much on the shuffling either. Now, I know I might get a lot of flack for this because there are a lot of people who believe that without the proper shuffling, you might not be able to infuse your energy into the card. And you might not be able to really connect with the deck that you have, and the essence of the energy, that mind, body, spirit connection might not take place holistically, and it might not be strong enough, which might prevent you from getting an accurate reading. While that is true in some cases, I've personally found that just having the question in your mind and shuffling it even a couple of times and pulling out a card will help you get some sort of insight into the situation. And that's because I mainly believe that cards by themselves don't have the magic, they don't have the power. It is the magic within us that is ignited by looking at the visual imagery provided within the cards. So what does this card make me feel, and why does it trigger a particular response, whether emotional or intellectual or physical, pertaining to my question? So the shuffling by itself isn't so much of the import here. It is how you interpret a card to your particular situation. So I usually just so this is a trick that I've started to do. So I hold my deck in my hand, and when I am thinking of a question, I just pause for a minute and I think of the question. So for example, how can I handle situation A, which is affecting me at work right now? And I just sit there for about 20-30 seconds and just think of that question and allowing my energy and that question to seep into the cards. Then I shuffle, and now here I've pulled. Again, look, expression. Clearly this card has, is giving me some message, and probably for you too. All right, how can I solve situation A, which is affecting me at work? Expression. It could be either expressing myself, being vocal about how I am not happy with the situation, or expressing in terms of showing off my skills, tooting my own horn. That's perfectly fine. These are two of the ways in which you can read this card, and I think this is pretty helpful, right? Even though I didn't shuffle too often, this message clearly wanted to come because I pulled this card out twice. So in this very video. So yeah, that's something that you can do, because shuffling too sometimes feels like a chore for a lot of people, because we've been told as beginner readers that you have to shuffle a couple of number of times, you have to shuffle in a particular way, that you have to read cards when they are in a particular direction. For example, if the reversals come up, you have to read a reversal because their meaning is different from a upright card. If you're using a circular card, like for example the Wild Unknown Archetypes deck, you have to take into consideration the tilt of the card. Now all these things, while they add nuances and layers to your reading, it's not particularly helpful when you're trying to reconnect with your practice. So scrub all that away and keep your practice simple. That's what I say, keep your practice simple. Third tip is, don't try to force the meanings from the cards if you can't get anything immediately. So for example, let me take out a tarot deck this time. All right. So yesterday I actually pulled out the Emperor reversed. Now, when I was looking at the card that's the Emperor reversed, I couldn't understand what it meant for me. So I figured, initially when I started my practice, I would really try to force myself into finding out what this card really meant. I would go online and Google all the reversed meanings of the Emperor and try to, either divine what is happening, what might happen in during the day or in the future, or how I can use the Emperor reversed message to, focus on how I'm working through the day. And at the end of the day, when I recapped everything that happened, and I found that, hey, there was nothing sort of resonant with what the Emperor reversed meant, I would be disappointed, and I would start to question the cartomancy as a whole. That's when I realized that over the course of many months, that sometimes the message isn't clear immediately, and that's perfectly okay. So if you pull a card and you're not sure what it means, don't try to force meaning into it. Instead, wait, just keep the card on your altar. You can have a card holder, just keep it on your altar and just keep looking at it, or maybe keep it in your purse, keep it in your wallet, keep it in your pocket, anything. And or maybe even a bookmark. I say keep it as a bookmark. I use my cards as bookmarks quite a few times because there's a book that I carry everywhere I go, because I'm an avid reader. If you know my channel, you already know that. And I use my cards as bookmarks because whenever you open the book, you see the card, and then as you're progressing through the day, whenever you get those 5 minutes to read, you can take a look at the card again and you can try to see how the energies of the card are playing out. So don't try to force the meaning immediately when you pull out a card. If it's not clear, that's perfectly fine. Set it aside. Go about your day as usual and allow the message of the card to permeate through you. Sometimes it helps to journal at the end of the night, or that is end of evening when you're about to wind down, and then you can start to find patterns emerging which have some correlation to how or what card you pulled out. Now, the next tip that I want to provide is skip the divination. Just stick to the card as a thought for the day. Now, as a new tarot reader, you're told that tarot and oracle cards are often used for divination, and there are a lot of people, although it's used for psychological reasons as well, like how I'm doing right now, a lot of people still do use it for divination, and that's perfectly fine because it does work many times, but not every day. And when we try to really divine things, we're forcing meanings into cards that are not there. We're forcing ourselves to see patterns that don't exist. That is our biases that are playing in, that are playing out right now. Those are our stereotyped beliefs, our prejudices that are coming into focus right now because we're trying to force a divination through the message of the card when none exists. So instead of divining, and when this divination doesn't come true, things don't pan out the way I want, I'm going to be disappointed. And this is something that you might have seen for yourself, you might have experienced yourself. When you divine something, it doesn't happen, you feel disappointed. So don't focus on divination, rather than focus on using the card as a thought for the day. So if I take the Emperor, one of the meanings that I can get from the Emperor is about strategy and stability, long-term vision instead of short-term planning. So in this case, I could use it as a thought for the day that, when looking at something, consider the entire forest, not the individual trees. That's a beautiful thought for the day to take on. You can write it down in your notebook, you can write it down in your affirmations book page, you can journal about it, you can, you can just think about this message as you go about the day. And that's a beautiful, empowering message to think of in any facet of life, and not necessarily just the spiritual aspect, right? The next tip that I provide is, so one of the decks that I use a lot is the Earthcraft Oracle, and another one is the Herbcrafters Tarot and the Spirit Song Tarot. So one way that I would recommend that you can interact with your tarot and oracle cards is to use these decks to find out how you can engage with the earth, and to find out fun facts about animals and plants for the day. So for example, one day I pulled out the forest bathing card from here, and I took that as a sign that I needed to go and spend some time in the park, and I did. I spent 2 glorious hours just running around amidst the trees, and just felt so good, and I felt so energized. So your deck can be, your card for the day can be a way for you to figure out how you can do things that you love, how you can spend time in nature, how you can relax yourself, bust the stress, and just re-energize yourself. You can also, like I mentioned, you can find out fun facts. For example, both the Herbcraft Tarot and the Spirit Song Tarot use animals and plants respectively in their decks as their imagery. And while both the guidebooks are really great, you can go a step further by using the animal on the card or the plant on the card as your subject for the day to know more about it. That way, you're not just focusing on the spiritual development of your life, but you're also gaining knowledge about things that are around the world, which you may sometimes never get to see because it's not endemic to your region, but it's still fun to learn about. That's something that I do a lot because I love wildlife. And so for example, it's echinacea is the plant associated with the 3 of air. Now I know what the 3 of air, which is 3 of swords, mean now, but I want to find out why echinacea was used for this. And in particular, I want to go beyond the spiritual symbolism of echinacea, and I want to find out about the actual reality of the plant. Okay, where does it grow? What kind of animals feed on it? Are there any insects pollinating it? Is it used in herbal medicine? Is it sort of a weed, or is it dangerous to other creatures? Do animals live near it? and you know, just the evolution of this plant. And it's such a beautiful way to not just connect with your cards but also to find out about the world. And you will find that when you use your cartomancy for not just spiritual growth but also scientific learning, it becomes so much more fun because you get to draw so many more meanings from this new knowledge that you're acquiring. Because a lot of times when people create decks, they look at things from a singular perspective of spirituality. They look at the philosophical aspects of that subject. But if you consider the scientific reality of a particular thing, like for example, echinacea, you can get more nuanced understandings of how you can apply that message of the card to your life. And that's something that I do every day, and I absolutely love this technique. And that's a beautiful way to connect with your cards because, you know, it inspires curiosity and you're really curious to see what new card am I getting today. So this is something that you can do with even cards that have only human imagery. Look for elements that you can see in your real life. For example, the Empress card in the RWS has a river flowing, or it has pomegranates in them. Pick those elements out, find out more about them. Learn about the rivers that are local to your region. Learn about environmental movements surrounding rivers in your region. Learn about how to grow a pomegranate tree at your home. These are things that you can do every day, and your card reading will be wonderful. So let me just recap once again, and I hope I don't forget anything. Remember that a card a day is not a rule. If you want to make your schedule flexible, that's perfectly all right. Second, creating a sacred space isn't important all the time. If it distracts you, then forget creating the sacred space. Read as you are, read where you are. Shuffling shouldn't become a chore. Shuffle only a couple of times. Focus on the question and infusing the deck with your energy. That can happen just as easily by just holding the card and just shuffling once. Then we spoke about how you can use your cards as bookmarks, wherein so that you can open your book every time and see the message every day. Next, don't force meanings into cards, but try to let your day progress as it is, and at the end of the day, reflect on any patterns that you see that are corresponding with your card's message. Next one is, divination is not the end goal of every tarot, oracles, or any cartomancy session. Use your cards as thoughts for their day. And finally, use your card as inspiration to figure out how to engage with the world around you, how to spend time in nature, and use your cards as prompts to learn about the beautiful animals and plants and other wonderful things out in the world, so that not just your spiritual growth happens, but your entire holistic development happens as well. So yeah, and once you do this, you will see that you are very curious to see what card you're going to pull every day, and it becomes more than just a mundane practice or a chore, and you start to enjoy the process, and that you will want to go back every day to pull cards, perhaps even multiple times a day. And yeah, that's the best way to sustain a long-term practice, is just to not make it a chore. And these tips have really helped me personally in not making cartomancy a chore, and I hope they will benefit you as well. Alright, so if you stuck around with me so far, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next episode on TL Syntax. Bye bye.